Hello and welcome to another monthly installment of Lean Catalyst. I'm your host, Damon Baker. I'm the CEO of Lean Focus. And it is in this dynamic 1-hour interview series that we bring together like-minded CEOs who've successfully embraced lean thinking to drive exceptional results in their organizations. It's through our captivating conversations that we'll dive into their remarkable achievements, uncovering the strategies, insights, and practical wisdom that have propelled themselves and their organizations forward. Each interview is going to feature an in-depth interview with a distinguished CEO who's demonstrated extraordinary leadership in leveraging lean principles. And it's a great opportunity for them to share with us their experiences, their strategies, and valuable knowledge that we can all apply in our own lean leadership journeys. So today it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Andy Silvernail, who is the CEO of International Paper. Andy, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Damon. How are you doing today?
Doing well. It's great to have you. I'm really excited to this interview, and I know it's going to be a great conversation, and the hour is going to go really fast. Before we get into Andy's background, a few housekeeping tips here for those that are joining the call here. The participants will be placed in listen-only mode. So we're going to have about 45 minutes to 50 minutes of discussion, and there's going to be a Q&A period at the end. So at the bottom of your control panel is a chat button. If you have a question that you would like Andy to get to, you can enter those questions there, and then I'm going to moderate those questions at the end of the interview today in a first come, first served basis, so you'll get your feedback on those. If you are unable to listen to this interview live, no problem. We record these and we post them on our leanfocus.com website. And if you go to the thought leadership page of that website, you'll see this interview archive and all the other previous historical interviews that we've done. And if you need another option, you can also go to our YouTube channel. So we have a Lean Focus LLC YouTube channel where these interviews and all of our previous webinars are actually archived as well. And there's probably 60, 70 hours of content there that you can watch on your own time. So a little bit about Andy's background, and then we'll get straight into it. So Andy has recently joined International Paper from KKR, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the world, where he served as an executive advisor. He has over 2 decades of experience leading international global companies in the manufacturing and technology sectors. And he's the former chairman and CEO of Madison Industries, which is one of the world's largest privately held companies. Prior to that, Andy served as the chairman and CEO of IDEX Corporation from 2011 and 2020. And he has agility and expertise in customer segmentation, innovation, lean business systems, mergers and acquisitions, and has been foundational to his success throughout his career. He's previously held executive positions as well at Rexnord, Newell, Rubbermaid, and Danaher Corporation, and also currently serves on the board of directors of Stryker Corporation, a large medical device company. On an education standpoint, Andy got his bachelor's degree from Dartmouth College in government and an MBA from Harvard Business School. So Andy, it's a pleasure to see you again, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm going to get straight away into maybe a tough, reflective question. So, as you reflect on your career over decades now, what was that critical, defining moment in your career? And sometimes it's early on, sometimes it's mid, sometimes later, where people come to the realization that, like, lean principles are the way I want to lead. And from that point forward, your leadership style changed to sort of align or be more congruent with the lean principles that you started to believe in. So is there like a catalyzing moment for you?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a fundamental light switch moment, but it was a series of early years. So, when I came out of undergraduate school, I went to Fidelity Investments, and I had the good fortune of covering industrial companies. So I was a junior analyst, and really got kind of deep into mid-cap industrial companies, and what I saw there was a differentiation around what started to make businesses stand out. And I was very young in my early journey, but there were three things that just consistently kept coming back. One was the quality of assets that were chosen. Two was the quality of the leadership team that was matched against those businesses. And then third was did they bring a consistent discipline to how they ran the business? Right. So those were just early insights, and you just saw again and again and again outperformance of businesses where those three things came together. And when I went to business school, I knew that I wanted to make the transition from the financial world into the operating world. And I had the incredible good fortune, serendipitously, really, of running into Danaher, which in 1998 was pretty much an unknown company. Um,
They
and
find you or did you find them?
Actually, I ran into them at a marketing career fair of all things. So Bob Piazza, Larry Culp, and Dennis Longo, for those of you who know those names from long ago. And so I joined them as an intern doing M&A, strategy and M&A. Worked for a guy by the name of Dan Comas, who I'm sure a lot of the people on this call know well. And then had the opportunity to join Danaher full time, starting in a strategy and M&A role with Larry. And I think that's what I would call that defining moment. So when part of one of the big reasons I joined Danaher is when I met them, I said, wow, these people think differently. So as I went and I talked to all kinds of large firms, that were incredibly successful and well known, certainly at the time, there was a different vibe. There was a different vibe about asset selection. There was a different vibe about people. And there was absolutely a different concept around a disciplined way of doing things, which we all know now today is the Danaher Business System. And so, I was in a very short time in that strategy and M&A role, and then got offered the opportunity to be a business unit leader, so to be a general manager. And I had to move a business from outside of Buffalo, New York, to Colorado. And so in that process, it was a business that had been part of the Danaher system for a while, but really hadn't gotten the attention and gotten the resources towards the Danaher business system. And then we moved it to Colorado as part of the Danaher Water Group. It was the nascent time of the Danaher Water Group that the business that I was becoming the leader of had been their first foray into water. And now we had bought a business called Hawk and a business called Longa, and we were putting all these assets together to build a platform in water. And when I got out to Colorado, it was a mess. I mean, it was absolutely a debacle. The business that I was closing and moving to Colorado was a debacle. There was kind of a lot of upheaval. It was a family-owned business. Both Longa and Hawk were family-owned businesses, and we were trying to put them together. And it's all the things you can think of that make a mess, right, as you're
Yeah.
combining assets. And then three people joined the team. Guy Schiller, who I know has done some work with you guys over time, came in HR. Frank Kalagi, who came in to run manufacturing, who's done a lot of work with you guys over time, and Michael Douglas. And they came in, and within a very short period of time, like, so all the grandiosity that people think about the Danaher business system, or the grandiosity of process, they just made it practical. Right. They made it very, very practical. And to be clear, right, so many people think about lean as a manufacturing thing. And what Danaher has always done differently is has thought of it, an end-to-end relationship from customer all the way through the supply base.
Yeah.
And I got to see and be part of a lean implementation from day one. Right, the Danaher business system, maybe not day one, but certainly a 12 months in, and be part of that. So I started in kind of this business unit role. And then, Larry Culp said to me, Andy, look, if you're going to be a successful leader, you missed a step, and we need you to go and run a
Sounds
manufacturing.
like a classic Larry Culp performance development.
Yeah, you missed a step.
Yeah.
And so, here I am, and I'm kind of, I'm a general manager at a very young age. And he's like, look, this is in everyone's best interest, mostly yours, that you go back into manufacturing. So I
Yeah.
went back in, and I went 3, 4 layers down into the same organization I was a general manager of, because there were 4 different business unit leaders in the business. I went back in, and I worked for Frank, actually someone who worked for Frank, to run a sub plant and printed circuit boards, and you saw how it really
So you were
works.
like a focus factory manager, I
I
think.
was.
Kind of saw,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And you realize how it actually happens, right? How it happens with the people who have to eat the cooking every day. Um, and I had to do that, right? I had to work with, the folks who were this is back in the day, hand placed circuit boards, and really thinking about, well, what does takt time mean? What does manufacturing throughput look like? What does standard work actually feel like when you're doing it day to day, when that's the job? And how does that connect back to safety, quality, delivery, productivity, growth in the reality of how people really work?
Yeah, not
Um,
conceptually, not in a
no,
framework. Yeah,
it wasn't Harvard Business School, man, right? It was the nitty gritty of how an organization functions. And so when I think today of so many things that I do as a leader today, is connecting the dots between big picture strategy, right? And how it actually happens today. And not even, in daily work. And I know this is something you guys really specialize in, but I'm a huge component of walking through a simple in my mind, there's a relatively simple conceptual equation to success in a business, right? The first thing is actually around a great place to work. So the creation of a great place to work. And because you can't deliver for customers, you can't beat competitors if you don't have a great place to work that attracts people. And I'm not talking about Google, kitchens and nice food and all that stuff, right? I'm talking about, do I understand what's expected of me? Do I have the tools to do my job? Do we have a winning attitude?
yeah,
Do we celebrate wins? Are we honest about failures? Do we hold people accountable? Those things, right? I learned, doing daily management every single day in a printed circuit board operation, and being responsible to make sure that the folks who were running, who were making the lines function, they had the tools that they had, and understanding that their families mattered to them, and the reason they were there because they were a single mom and they were trying to put food on the table, right? So it grounds it in reality. And so, the things that we talk about investors with are these big picture things and the magic of a system and blah, blah, blah. That's all good and it's all real, but it has to turn into fundamental reality of creating a great place to work first. And when you create a great place to work, that enables you to start moving towards customer excellence, right? That enables you to really think about. So, and by the way, in a great place to work, the first thing you do is you have to have safety, right? You have to have safety above all else. And I'm not talking about the finger scratch and things like that. I'm talking about things where people can get seriously hurt or killed.
yeah.
And you got to be committed to that stuff.
And I'm following along with you. You can also expand the definition of safety to be like psychological safety. Because when you
100%.
create this engagement type of atmosphere that you're talking about, where people want
100%.
to come in and they want to participate, they have to feel like their ideas are going to be received, listened to. They'll be empowered to do something about them. I think that's the key.
Absolutely. And so, to your question, what I saw there in that printed circuit board operation, and what I saw with Michael and Guy and Frank and their leadership of the lean transformation, is I saw the practical realities of what lean thinking turning into lean implementation, what it really does for a person, right? And so what it does is it creates an amazing place to work. It's safe. I know what's expected of me. I have the tools to do my job. You're eliminating frustrations, and I'm freaking winning, right? I'm winning. And I think we forget sometimes how important that is to the psychology of a human being, that they are actually winning, right? Not fake winning, but
Yeah.
real winning. And real winning means you are growing profitably. I'll never forget one time Steve Sims, another Danaher, icon, he said to me, Andy, what is winning? He just asked me that question. We were having this really interesting discussion. As a matter of fact, it's about some tough topics, actually. He goes, what's winning? And I just bang, you know, safe, profitable growth. Done. That's winning because all good things come from safe, profitable growth. Right. And so being absolutely obsessed with safe, profitable growth and being willing to do anything as a leader to help your people have an environment, because that's our job. Our job is to pick a direction with a good input and align great people with the right tools and capabilities for them to be successful. And when you do that, right, when the business grows, all good things happen. And so, it's one of those interesting fallacies about lean over time, which is, when we think of waste reduction, well, people sometimes want to go to cost. That's just a way of getting competitive, right? You're just that's the stakes so you get to win. Everything else is a decision that you've decided to fund it. You decided to fund some niceties, right? Versus winning. And so that moment at Danaher, those couple of years when I went back into the circuit board operation, and I saw how lean actually enables that great place to work, which then enables customer excellence, which then drives safe, profitable growth. That was the moment for me.
Yeah. When Larry said, "Hey, you need to run an operation," was your initial reaction like, "Oh, that's cool! Like, I can't wait to do that! Like, this is exciting," or did you feel like it was, 3 steps forward and 2 steps back? And the reason I ask is like, I think certain individuals would respond to that in different ways.
Yeah. I'd like to say to everybody on here that it was a perfect answer, like, oh no, that's absolutely the greatest thing ever. There was a part of me that my ego got in the way. It did. But the thing I had though is I had Guy, I had Frank, and I had Michael, and they were all between, kind of, 7 to 10 years older than me to 20 years older than me, and they had a perspective on what it took to be successful at Danaher. And Danaher had already, when I was there, right, the world hadn't known it at the time, but Danaher had already had ridiculous growth. So you got to remember when George Sherman became CEO in 1988, it was a $400 million market cap, right? When he retired in 2000, it was 11 billion, right?
Wow.
So it was a 25 bagger or something, right, at that time, which is now, of course, the combined pieces are like 350 billion. Of all the pieces that have come out of Danaher. So right, it's a crazy thought when you really think about that. Um,
Yeah.
and and so I had mentors who were looking at me going, Andy, and these are people I now trusted, right? Because we went from this colossal sort of mess and all these pieces to absolutely we're growing profits 30% a year, organically. And so I trusted them and I got to be inside the Frank bubble, so to speak, and got to learn from somebody. And for those of you who have ever spent time with Frank Kalagi, he couldn't be more humble and more caring and more committed to winning because he knows what winning does. And so I had the quick ego moment, and then I got to work, and it was the best thing I probably ever did.
Yeah, I mean, from outside looking in, we never worked with each other at Danaher, but I've seen you in your board capacity at Stryker. I've seen you in your CEO role at International Paper, and I couldn't put my finger on the reasons why. And I think I maybe have a hypothesis now, but like I see you make strategic decisions incorporating like the operator and sort of like the frontline associate viewpoint, if you will. And so like you're making these large macro decisions for the business, of course, in the benefit of the business, but also like keeping in mind like the stakeholders on the front line. And I think that's really difficult to do if you haven't walked in those shoes yourself. And I even know like
I think you're right.
more detailed sorts of things that are operations topics,
Yeah.
your ability to like kind of talk through those and then again relate those things to sort of macro board topics. So you're able to uh, kind of fly at these different elevations. So like if I have to communicate this challenge to a board that may be completely operational in nature and nobody wants to understand how the sausage is made, you're able to change that narrative to kind of talk about it as like working capital impact and value creation and these kinds of things. But then, as you move down lower in the organization, adapt that message to the stakeholders as well. And I don't know if I'm pretty confident you wouldn't be able to do that had you not had those experiences early on in your career.
I think you're right, Damon. Part of it was my upbringing, right? I was brought up on a farm and in a very small town with, I mean, nobody had money, right? I mean, the richest people in town worked at the paper mill, which interestingly enough, IP owned at one point. And but so part of it is that's who I grew up with. That was my life. And the other part was exactly that experience. And what I saw at Danaher, and I think this is really important, but people have asked me many, many, many times, what's the magic of Danaher? Right? And my answer is nothing. There is no magic of Danaher. What the
Yeah,
Danaher
I'm ready. They're waiting for the wisdom, and they hear nothing.
well, I mean, I'll give you magic, but it's no different than it is in all parts of life. It is phenomenal discipline. And people can kind of read that as militaristic discipline. And no, it's saying we have agreed what we are going to be. We have agreed how we're going to work, and we're going to hold ourselves to that standard. It's no different than Nick Saban at Alabama, right? It's no different than anything like that. It's you've set an incredibly high standard, and you've set an agreed upon way that you're going to work, culture and method, process, and you're going to implement that in an incredibly disciplined way. And when you get down to it, right, every single thing happens with a human to human interaction, a human to machine interaction, or a human to data interaction, right? If you just kind of think of it in the simplest ways. Well, all of those things end with a human. And so a human is doing the work. And so what we're trying to do, if we think about it, what we're trying to do is we're trying to enable the humans, the people, to be successful. That's what you're trying to do. And when I think about lean, the thing that really clicked for me with lean, right, is I'm going to get rid of the noise, right? So I'm getting rid of the noise, and I'm allowing people to work on the things that actually matter. And then there's tools and there's techniques and there's all kinds of things that go into it, right? But that's really fundamentally what it is. And so when I was at IDEX, one of the struggles that I had was I had walked into an environment. So, I mean, you walk through my career, but really until International Paper, until going to leaving IDEX, I had been basically at one adjacency from Danaher my whole career, right? I mean, I had been in environments where Danaher had a huge influence in those environments in one way or the other.
And
And so
meaning like they aspired to sort of have a similar model. Maybe there was leaders there in
Well,
those.
actually, for the most part, except for Newell, it was just there were a huge number. Either it was Danaher or it was someone who had retired for Danaher or someone who had recruited from
Yeah,
Danaher, right, all the way through that.
Danaher's mom, Danaher
Yeah,
family.
it really was. But when I went to IDEX, we were struggling with what we had called mixed model lean, right? We call it the IDEX operating model. We struggled with mixed model lean. And not unlike a lot of Danaher companies, we had incredible variability. We had the volume mix tended to be low volume, very high mix, and we tried to solve that in a way. And I started getting interested in 80/20 at the time. And if you go back all those years, that was a time when there was all these debates about, well, is it ITW's 80/20 or is it Danaher business system, blah blah blah.
So for those
And
that maybe don't know what 80/20 is, can you sort of give like the quick?
yeah, so 80/20 is basically the expression of the Pareto principle, right? Which is saying that a very small number of inputs, 20% of your inputs, drive 80% of your outputs. That's philosophically, that's what it is. And ITW over the years has turned that into their own business system. And with that philosophy of focus on what matters most. And so there was this debate back and forth about, well, which system's better? And what I realized was neither was better. It really is, right? And what it really is that the insights and the mentality of the Pareto principle. And for those of you who have been on a lean journey, everything in root cause analysis, whether it's root cause analysis on the front end or it's countermeasuring, is based on that philosophy, right? It was institutionalizing that and then bringing other lean principles connected to that. So think of it as a continuum, 80/20, or maybe a circular, right? 80/20 on the front end around insights, strategic insights, market segmentation, understanding, what matters most, understanding kind of how assets fit against revenue and people and et cetera, and then driving lean thinking across those insights. And
Yeah,
so people have asked me, well, where does one start? Where does one end? I'm like, it's the infinity
that's
symbol,
great.
right? um, and so those insights became very powerful. And so how you marry those insights around Pareto-based thinking and then driving results or enabling results with lean thinking, they are one and the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, if I kind of go back to some things that you were saying earlier, you talked about three things. One of those things was like this sort of dogmatic devotion to discipline, to a process or a system that works, right? So I think you would probably say, I know I would, that in my 10 years at Danaher, I don't ever remember a time where we said, let's try something different than BBS. Let's do. So there was like this constancy of purpose in applying the process with rigor. And Jim Collins actually coined a term in one of his books called the 20-mile march company, where
Yes.
it's like they just they run the same 20-mile march like day in and day out, and it's not glamorous, and from the outside in it looks kind of basic, and you sort of go like, well, where's the magic here? To me, that is the magic. The magic
That
is
is the
just
magic.
right, and it's kind of like all other things in life. It's like when you get told the answer is hard work, dedication, and commitment, you look for that next thing, like exercise or being rich or whatever, whatever, learning a
Yeah.
language. We're all in search of that silver bullet, and
Well, you
I'm
found it, right? You found it, which is discipline,
right.
focus, and being willing to do the work.
That's
Uh,
hard. That's hard.
it's really hard, right? And it's not glamorous. So
No,
let me use an example. So, at IDEX, when I became CEO of IDEX, we were I joined in 2009, January of 2009. We had $1.5 billion market cap. When I became CEO, I think we were at about a $3 billion market cap, plus or minus, right? Somewhere in that range. And so we came off the depths of the Great Recession. We bounced back. We had really good assets, and we were viewed as being a good company. But the reality is that when you look back 5 years, we were in the bottom third of total shareholder return of our investment peers. And the reason we were was a combination of things. We had done a lot of acquisitions that we had paid reasonable, not high prices for, but we paid heavy, and we hadn't recognized the synergies. We had consistently missed our strat plan goals in terms of the growth rates. And then when you got into it, what you realized was we had left a huge amount of money on the table with just the basics of blocking and tackling. And one of the really early insights for me at Danaher was, if you remember, there's an old saying, I think it may have been Michael Porter who said, operational excellence is not a strategy, right? I think he said that. And what I learned at Danaher is he's wrong. He's wrong. It's not the strategy. It can't be the only thing you do. But I remember when we couldn't ship product, right? Or we were on time, or we had quality issues or whatever with all the things that we were doing. You can't ask a customer for new business, right? You
yeah,
can't ask for price. You can't ask for the permission to innovate with them when you can't do the basics well.
yeah. I
And
describe it as operational excellence is cardio, and strategy deployment is weightlifting.
that's a great way to put it. But the other thing, Damon, I know you know this, and I know your audience knows this, but I've now had a career where I've literally seen between the investment world, the number of businesses I got to see within Danaher, the number of businesses, we had 40 businesses at IDEX, we had businesses at Madison, and I saw a whole bunch of things in the private equity world, right? So across that spectrum, you're talking literally, a couple of hundred businesses intimately, and hundreds of businesses between acquisitions we looked at, et cetera. Very few companies, I'm talking less than 20%. So the 80-20 rule definitely holds. Deliver day in and day out to the base commitments that their customers expect, and deliver the base commitments that their people expect. They just don't do it. And so, I've seen time and time again where that focus on the basics, right? So you earn the right to grow, right? I get safety right, I get quality right, I get delivery right, I get productivity right. That enables the investment and growth. So we always talk about the stack of today, Kaizen, strategy, deployment, right? We always talk about that stack. People, in the audience who are familiar with that, those you earn each level of the stack, right? You don't just go to it. You earn the right for a smart strategy and strategy deployment. When you first start off utilizing strategy deployment, for those of you who are familiar with that, as Michael Douglas used to always say to me, Andy, one man's KPI is another man's strategy deployment, depending upon where you are in your journey. And so if your basic safety isn't right, you're deploying strategy, right? If your basic delivery isn't right, you're deploying delivery. You're right.
You think part of the root cause of this is CEOs in particular are sort of lured by the siren call of, strategic things that seem like trendy and new and innovative and different, and so they chase those things, and then they try to execute those things against the backdrop of an organization that hasn't, performed operationally for forever or for years. So now you're trying to lay new on top of chaos, and then new's not working, so then they chase more new, and so now it's more new on top of new on top of chaos. And when you step back, like after years of going through these kinds of like flavor of the month chasing kinds of strategic initiatives, you just have this complex, overbloated, administrative sort of business that nobody can really tell the story of how did we get to where we got, but we know that it's broken, and now we feel kind of helpless to fix it.
Yeah. Yes, Damon. I think you're absolutely right about that. I'm living that at IP right now, and it was one of the things that was so attractive to me about coming to IP. So go back to my earliest insights at Fidelity, right? Good businesses, good people, disciplined methodology to run that business, right? At IP, what I came into is a business that has underperformed for literally 2 decades, but has an incredibly valuable packaging franchise, right? Sustainable packaging is what we do. Paper-based packaging.
Pause me for a second, because so I've yet to ask this question of any CEO. I think you're probably the best person to ask this to on this interview. Is I'm so fascinated by what goes through your head, like day one on the job. I'm leading, international paper, $20 billion publicly traded company. Like, what's your methodology to get your arms around all of that, to figure out like what's the 80-20 that I need to like. So I used to listen to Howard Stern, and he'd ask these musicians like the songwriting composition process, and kind of walk me through like how you created this hit song in 5 minutes. Like you've stepped into multiple organizations, and very quickly you've had to get up to speed on what the current state is, and then determine the path forward. So like, I think you were getting there on the IP, but like I want to like go back to like day one.
Sure.
Like, what's the process?
Well,
And we're all going to take notes.
It starts before day one, right? So, when I started evaluating whether or not I wanted to go to IP, there were three questions that I felt like I had to ask and answer. The first question was, can this business win, right? Is this a business that has the fundamental economics? And if you look at the structural realities of the business, does it have the right to win? Can it win?
What criteria do you look at there? Like product offering, competitive set. What are the things that
Yeah. Well, I think so. You've got to start at the highest level, and you've got to ask about market structure, right? So if you look at, say, the commodity paper business, I would not have joined the company in a commodity paper business, right? That business is not going to win over time, right? You can win relative to your competition, but you're not going to drive above market.
That would be the lowest cost producer strategy, essentially, right?
Well, it's a lowest cost producer strategy when there's a constant race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the structure of the commodity paper business, you're always the competitors and customers will always drive to marginal cost because there's nothing else that differentiates it. And so yeah, and I'm not interested in those kinds of businesses. And so what I saw,
clips, these kinds of things.
I mean, look, if you are truly the low cost producer, and you have a sustainable way of being the low cost producer, can you earn outsized returns? You absolutely can, right? You can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to earn on a consistent basis, structural differentiation and therefore higher returns, there's got to be more to it. And what I so you're trying to understand strategically, does that exist? So I'm trying to ask the question of can it win? And those questions are around, go ahead, Damon.
No, I was gonna say, I'm
Yeah.
just keeping
So
track
so
of.
can so so can it win? And winning means that there's the ability to structurally differentiate. And in our world, what that means is number one, being a low cost producer by the unit of measure that the customer buys, which they're buying a packaging solution. So you got to be the low cost producer there. That doesn't mean you're going to be the low price producer, but what that gives you is it gives you the advantage of getting there, right? Because you're going to have more resources to reinvest in the future than your competitor. The second thing is service excellence, starting with quality and on-time delivery, right? So if you think about our world, think about all the pieces that the folks who are listening to us today, where you could go into your pick, pack, and ship lines, like just go into there. And you ask yourself, no one thinks about your pick, pack, and ship your boxes until you don't have a box, right? Or until you don't have a box that performs correctly. And so that thing that costs pennies, when your operator or your equipment can't pick that thing correctly, the right thing at the right time, you've gone from pennies to dollars to tens of dollars,
The
right?
warehouse shuts down for Amazon. Yeah.
Very quickly. Exactly right. So
So from your
service,
vantage point, the CEO, it's like service excellence. How do you personally, in like 90 days or 6 months, get your arms around the current state of service excellence in international paper? Like,
yeah,
what do you
man,
look
you
at?
got to
What are
go. It's
now?
Gemba. Damon, it's the old go to Gemba, right? You got to go. You got to go see it. And so, within days of being here, I was at my first box plant. Within weeks of being here, I was at my first mill. And you just got to go and you got to
Customers,
see
we're
it.
talking to customers too.
Absolutely. I did that before I joined, right? And before I even joined, I had my first customer meeting. And you are doing that value stream map. If you think of a value stream map, we all typically think of a value stream map within the walls of a facility, right? Or maybe to the customer. The right value stream map is through the customer and through the supply base, right? So if you think about that whole thing, if you can really do a value stream map, and that's what I'm doing, right? I'm doing that value stream map all the way through our customers' success and all the way through our suppliers to
Were you
understand.
by surprise and like when you're going at these different stakeholder groups and asking these questions, were people surprised to see you?
Yes, oh, very, right? They hadn't seen a CEO in ever in
Yeah.
some cases. And then you're asking like really specific questions like, well, so when that person is sitting here and they pick a box and the right one isn't there, what happens? And then you just follow it. And you realize that pennies become dollars, become tens of dollars, become hundreds or thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. Um, and you start understanding the pain points, right? You start understanding the waste points. And so as you're digging into these things, you're working to understand that concept of that. So structurally, can the business win, right? So you're asking that first question: structurally, can the business win?
But
Meaning
like
that
service excellence, as I kind of unpack it, I don't know if the words in your mouth, sounds like, it's customer focus service excellence. Like, are we aligning ourselves in service of our customer and what job they need to perform? And are we enabling them to do that in a way, that's consistent and reliable?
yes, from their perspective, not
Yeah,
from your perspective, right?
exactly. Yeah.
How they see success, not how you want to see
Yes.
success.
And that
And
requires
so,
humility, right?
yeah, it's really understanding it from their perspective, and then operationalizing around servicing that, right? And building that back. And again, link the 80/20 mindset with lean thinking, which is when you have decided what customers and what product you want to be in because of the connection to the right place to be to win in that market. So answering that first question, can the business win?
Yeah.
When you then subsegment down, database subsegmentation, you're now asking the questions that lead into kind of the lean philosophy. You're asking that about a narrow subsegment. You're not asking about the whole world. right?
Yeah,
So back to the concept that, I was a value stream manager when I was at Danaher in that job. My role was actually value stream manager, right? That was the title, I think. Um,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
that I think is a
questions. It's like, hey, team, what waste can we take out of international paper? Right, long list.
yes,
Hey, team, what waste can we take out of this carton fulfillment process to Amazon because they have
that's
this
exactly
problem.
right. Yeah. And what that leads to, right, is so go back to the three elements of strategy for IP to win. Low cost by customer solution. So for us, let's just call it, cost per square foot of corrugated packaging, right? So you got to be there. So how do you need to take out anything that doesn't add value, because you can't be low cost unless you are willing to do that. You need to invest in the assets that enable that and invest in the people that enable that to happen. The second thing around service excellence, right, is from your point, is from their perspective. How do they see the world? What matters to them? What problems do you need to solve for them? And as we all know who've done a value stream map, it's never what you think, right? Maybe at the highest level, but then you get into it and you're like, wow, this is really a person machine interaction issue, or a person data interaction, or a person person interaction. We're not getting the right signals, right? Tact time isn't flowing through the business correctly. So we can understand, kind of how to do that. Um, and so as you're driving that, you're understanding service excellence from their perspective. And then, right, you're narrowing that down to, you're saying, I want to compete in these segments, and I know that my relative supply position matters, right? So those of us who have ever done the MECO charts, we all know that you earn superior returns in places where you have strength relative to your competitors. And so how do you align everything to that? So what you're doing in this insight from the time before I joined, so doing the research, understanding the potential of the business, you're laying that out, and then you're getting in and you're essentially trying to validate or refute or refine the thesis. So that early stage is that first, let's call it 90 days. That first 90 days is a massive learning journey. And you use the word humble. You have to come into it, with the child's eyes. You have to come into it with the idea that I don't know anything. And so that old, concept of drawing the circle on the shop floor and standing and watching, it's the proverbial example of that, right? It is doing that, but you're doing that in lots of environments. You're doing that with the customer. You're doing that with investors. You're doing that all the way through the execution of the supply chain from our customer to our supply base. And you're witnessing, you're watching, and you're asking yourself what has to be true to make a winning proposition that will allow for profitable growth. So there's a lot of that, and in that process, what you're doing, Damon, right, is you're building relationships. Um, for those of you who have done a Kaizen event that you did not include the people who had to live with the cooking, all know that Kaizen event is going to fail. We've all done it, right? We've all done it. We're going to fix this for you, and you haven't included the person who needs it. When you do that, you've now eliminated buy-in. So that, to your question, that first 90 days was really all about buy-in. It's all about buy-in. So you're learning, but you're trying to get buy-in because as you're learning, right, you're synthesizing. And so on day 91, I literally came in front of the company and said, "This is what I heard from you. Is this right?" And
So
everyone's like,
this didn't
"Yeah,
sound like a solo activity where Andy sort of like had his headphones on the whole time and was ignoring the rest of the team. You're kind of doing these things together and reflecting on the insights together along the way, and what are the
correct,
implications of that. And I think there's sort
correct."
of dual purposes, like you're teaching people how to do the thing that you're talking about you do in the first 90 days, which they can continually replicate day in and day out throughout their careers, no matter where they go. Right, that would be the sort of mantra I lead. I want to make sure I capture the third one correctly, because
Yeah,
so it was, do we have the right to win? Can we win?
yep,
How are we performing in the service excellence space in the eyes of the
yep,
customer? And this
right.
third one, the prioritization of the opportunity within sort of the market. Like now that we know, like where do we go? Where do we 80/20 and go focus?
Actually, I would put that into one and two. The the
Okay.
the the, the third one, right, is will the organization allow you to make change.
Okay, that's interesting.
And that starts at the board level, right? That starts at the board level, and then it goes through your entire employee base, right? And so there are some change scenarios.
How do you unpack all of that? I imagine there's a before I say yes phase, then there's now I'm trying to figure out what did I sign up to.
Yes, so I had to assess. I had to make at the board level, right? I could assess that during the hiring process, right? Because I'm laying out to them saying, this is what these are my insights, and this is what I believe is going to take for change, and to have that, to face the brutal facts, so to speak, use a Jim Collins, to go back to Jim Collins, face the brutal facts, and have an open conversation with the board, and understand their willingness to enable change, right? And so I got very comfortable with that. And then, as you know, everything from there on out is really a relationship of some kind. And even the board, right? It's a relationship. But you're building those relationships, and what you're trying to decide pretty early is will people go for the ride? And you've got to decide before you say yes to taking the job. You've got to decide, is can I convince enough people to go for the ride? Whether it's hopefully you've said yes to the board, investors, your people. And I think understanding, can I get people there? And what I saw within IP early was an insatiable appetite for the right kind of change, right? An absolute insatiable appetite for, we want to win. We're tired of this. The mistakes that we had made as a company that got in the way of outperformance had really been our big decisions, right? So you talked about that slippery slope of decision making, where next big thing, next big idea, versus doing the hardcore stuff time in and time out. There was an incredible appetite for that. So yes, you still got to get buy-in. So now it's a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of putting the small wins on the table. It's a lot of those things that enable you to then start to get into the minutia. So right now, we're in the process right now of deploying strategy deployment in the organization. Right. So we're in that phase right now. So we've got a clarity of strategy. We're now at deployment. And this is where it's both fun and really nitty-gritty, right? Because the quality of root cause analysis that I had to do at the IP level really isn't that relevant at the level of a box plant, or the level of supply chain, or out of a mill. And so you got to be able, you get the willingness to do the root cause problem solving, the willingness to focus on those critical few, and be willing to stick with focusing on the critical few when not everything goes right. And so it comes back again to the nitty gritty of first of all, do you have the right to win? And then can you convince and build the relationships with people? And convincing them, right, is all about convincing them that it's in their best interest, right? So you have to understand, is it in their best interest? So one of the things that I saw early on at Danaher, right, with people were terrified with lean implementation, right? They were terrified that it meant something bad. Well, it means change, so that can be viewed as that. But what's really powerful is when they have that first experience, when that in that printed circuit board operation, when they've had 10 years of frustration, and you do a Kaizen event, and their life just got better overnight. I mean, just remarkably better, right? They have the tools that they need. They're not being yelled at every day, right? They're winning. They're winning. And so what you're trying to do is understand that from the highest level of strategy, and start to understand that in the pockets, and then bringing people along in that exploration, in that journey, right? You're bringing them into the Gemba circle. That's what you're doing, right? You're getting, it's kind of getting 40,000 people into the Gemba circle to see, this is what we need to do.
I find this absolutely fascinating. I could probably go on for hours on this topic. We've got some questions here from the folks on the call. You ready to take some questions?
Absolutely. You bet.
Okay, this first question. The beauty of DBS was that it was infusing atomic habits in the rank and file in their own functions through daily management and sustaining improvements through Kaizen, aka muscle building. What's your reaction to that?
I think right. I think it is. It's if you use the fitness analogy as a good analogy, right? The methodology, the lean methodology, call it DBS, whatever. It is understanding that these are good practices to do. It's doing the cardio, it's doing the weightlifting, it's doing the stretching every single day to make the body capable. And so you start small. And the human body is a great way to think of this, right? You start small. You can't go run a marathon tomorrow if you've been on the couch. You got to start by walking. And the people who get up and go run and sprint, they break themselves. So, one of the famous ones is inventory. People, we got to lower our inventory. And so people do colossally stupid things to lower inventory that just pops back up, right? Versus no, inventory is a math equation, right? It's capability versus demand. That's all it is. That's all it is. And building it slowly and surely around that. And my encouragement to people as you think about or you're embarking on a lean journey is actually start very small, very small. Damon, I know you guys are really famous for your lighthouse approach. And I think that's the right way to do it, right? And we're doing that here at IP. We've got, two regions, two box plant regions and two mills out of 105 box plants and 20-ish mills that we're starting with to prove we can do it and to prove excellence. And that feels small, right? It feels kind of small. You're like, well, geez, are you going to make enough progress? No, you got to build the body. You got to run that marathon. And I think that analogy or the explanation that your guest or your viewer asked, I think that's a good one.
All right, here's another one for you. Thank you for making the time to share your learnings. How much of the manufacturing part of the DBS lean toolkit do you think is transportable to the process industry? And have you seen DBS like practitioners be as effective in process plants? Given that you're now at IP, I very much want to value your thoughts.
Yeah, so my experience, look, I process industries and I've been in service industries, right? So within the different businesses that I have had responsibility for over the years, I've been in both. And lean thinking works everywhere, right? It works in consulting. I mean, Dave, in your world, right? I'm sure you apply your own tools. And so it's so easy for people to get stuck in sort of the Toyota production system, the machine that changed the world mind frame. That's an easy place to get stuck. When again, go back to say 80-20 thinking, go back to lean thinking. 80-20 is about what matters most. That's all it is. It's a methodology for focusing on what matters most. Lean is a methodology for focusing on value creation, so focusing against what matters most, and the elimination of waste in that pursuit. And if you approach it from that perspective versus a manufacturing just only mindset, I make widgets, it expands everything. And that frankly is, if you're going to say, what's the magic of the Danaher business system? Number one, it is the discipline. Number two, I would say it is the true end-to-end conceptualization of value. Those are the other things that I think are real magic.
One thing I'd add, just like to address the Danaher thing. So you were really like a part of Danaher's first acquisition that I would say acquired a company that had more than just discrete manufacturing. So, Hawk was making chemicals. That's a continuous process, right? And
Correct.
since that acquisition, and even more so now, like Danaher is a mix of different manufacturing models: discrete, low volume, high mix, high volume, low mix, continuous manufacturing, chemical, reagents, life sciences.
Correct.
So when Danaher would try to hire ex-Toyota people into the business system office, they would fail completely because there was only one flavor of TPS at Toyota. But in Danaher, we had to think, how does DBS apply in 400 different operating companies, P&Ls, multiple different manufacturing models, discrete, continuous, high volume, low volume. So it applies, and many folks that were there kind of early on in the Danaher tenure didn't have to do that, but it is a much more complex, varied business now, and they've had to adapt DBS to fit for those reasons.
So I very, very much agree with that. And again, I think it fits against, I mean, God, you can fit against anything in life, actually.
Yeah.
It's not just manufacturing, it's anything in life. It's asking the question of what matters most and how do I apply things that are value added versus value neutral or value destructive.
100%. Here's just a compliment to you. So great. There's people like Andy that think in the manner he does. I wish there were more. Thanks for setting this up.
All right, I got a fan.
There's a question kind of on board leadership. So when you're on the board and you're not quote unquote the CEO of the company, how do you try to maybe influence the CEO of that company that might not be on a lean journey,
Yeah.
that they should take one? Because you got a lot of different dynamics there, sort of, relationship wise that you have to navigate.
Yeah. So I think, look, I've been on a number of boards over the years. And what you have to realize when you're on a board is you're not an operator, right? You're not management. Your job fundamentally, if you think about it, is governance, is hiring the CEO and helping her or him pick their teams. It's strategy, insights, and overview, and it's accountability. That's the job. You're hiring the CEO and her or his team to make it happen. And you got to respect that. You deeply have to respect that. I'm on the board of Stryker, as you mentioned, and Kevin Lobo and his team have done an amazing job. If you look at what they have done, I've been on the board 11 years now, and I think I want to say the stock was $75 when I joined the board, and it's almost 400 today. And 120 or 130 billion-dollar market cap. I mean, just an awesome run. They are really the prototypical med tech business, and they're early in their lean journey. They're early, but if you actually look at a lot of their philosophies on the commercial end, and actually how they run the commercial side of the business, which has been the magic. They don't call it lean. It's a lot of the same philosophies,
The value
right?
stream approach to sales, and I think that's why they win commercially is they they specialize in the discipline in their go-to-market approach. And
It's
doctors feel
phenomenal.
like they're getting
It's
more
it's
love than having the sales rep who carries everything, who's everything.
yeah. And then look, I think they're going to unlock even more magic on their journey because it's going to enable enormous reinvestment that competitors won't be able to do, right? And just to invest in that incredible growth engine that is them. And so you got to let Kevin do his job, right? You got to let Kevin Lobo, do his job, and you got to let the CEO, hire a CEO to do the job. Now, you're an advisor and you're a counselor, and you can help them and you can guide. But you got to understand where the boundaries are. And if it ain't working, you got the wrong CEO. But you got to understand that balance between advisor, governor, so to speak, and leader manager.
You have another super fan, Andy. So not a question, a comment. I would like to say that Andy's done a fantastic job of putting into a very short period of time so many key points and fundamental messages. As someone responsible for onboarding leaders to our company's operating model, we send so many similar messages, and I appreciate the simplicity of Andy's messaging and appreciate the validation. This has been one of the very best sessions I've had the opportunity to observe. Did you know you're going to have a fan club when you sign on for this?
Well, that's awfully kind. And the thing that actually means the most to me in that is simplicity. And the reason I say that is I really am a believer that almost all good things, business or life, come in doing simple things exceptionally well. And if you just kind of really see it again and again and again, man, you see it. And we as leaders tend to make things really complex for lots of different reasons that we could use a whole nother episode to talk about. But I do believe that as leaders, one of the most important things is to be able to distill down for your people the simplicity of what they're being asked to do, the commander's intent, right? What are you asking them to do? Because people want to win, right? Look, there's a very small number of people I run into in my life that go, yeah, I wake up today and I want to suck. I mean, people don't want to do that, right? They want to have a fulfilling life, and work is such an important part of life that our job as leader is to make things simple for folks that they can then go. I mean, I really think that the magic of what we've done in a short period of time at IP, and look, no one scored any touchdowns yet at IP, so there's no points, there's no real points on the board. The magic of what we're trying to do is be explicit about this is our mission. This is why we exist. We're now going to put our people against that, right? We're going to put our people. We're going to be very clear in our priorities, and then we're going to drive process discipline to execute the priorities, right? It's purpose, people, priorities, process, and you get performance.
We're at time. It's been a pleasure. It's just been a pleasure to get to know you too. I wish you could have met a lot earlier in our careers, but I'm just grateful to know you and be a part of your journey at IP and be a observer. So we'll have to do this again. And
I'd love to.
We've got some reps and some stories that you can talk about at IP, and I know you'll kill it.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And Damon, thank you for the invitation about this. I'm passionate about this topic because I'm passionate about people winning. And I think that what you guys do at Lean Focus is a different way than we've seen in some ways, right? It's very much down to the basics and doing it right for the right reasons. And I think that's admirable.
Thank you. All right. So before we bid farewell to Andy, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on his valuable insights and practical wisdom that he shared with us today. And if you are on a lean transformation journey or you feel like you want to start one, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here for you. And again, thank you, Andy, for sharing your experiences and expertise with us. And I'm grateful for his contributions to this overall Lean Catalyst interview series. We hope to see all of you next month on the next edition of Lean Catalyst. And as I mentioned earlier in the interview, you can watch this interview and all previous interviews that we've done by going to leanfocus.com. Thank you all for taking part, and thank you, Andy, for taking part as well. And I wish you all a great rest of your week and happy holidays as well. Take care. Bye now.